we're going to start with Lori Kozlowski. Lori is right here to my left, and Lori is a writer and digital editor who explores storytelling in all of its forms. Lori currently serves as the editorial director at Atom Factory, building a new platform that examines technology, entertainment, startups, and culture. Previously, Lori was a columnist for Forbes, writing about entrepreneurs, startups, and technology. It's quite a resume you have, and we're thrilled to have you here today.
Thank you.
So Lori, my question for you to start is, as we all know, in many industries, innovation tends to happen in smaller startups where a certain kind of energy and flexibility and that creative indie spirit can serve as the engine to fuel rapid success. And that over time, can really take hold and drive out old line companies from the competition. We've seen this with Silicon Beach. Silicon Beach is a great example of this and has seen rapid growth in the last 2 years. Both the major studios and broadcasting cable networks in LA and other types of very well-established tech companies from Silicon Valley have really taken notice. I'm sure you would agree with that. So my question is, do you think this is a tectonic shift, and will the large producers of content meld and adapt into this exciting new media model so as to remain vibrant, innovative, relevant, and competitive?
Yeah, I think in our first couple sessions we were going over a lot of economic stats, and I keep seeing that red line going down in my head, but I'm actually very optimistic about the future based on the reporting I did for Forbes for about 2.5 years here about Silicon Beach or LA tech. Out of that arena, we saw companies like Maker Studios, which is a YouTube network or multi-channel network, get purchased by Disney for $500 million, or Awesomeness TV, which is tween or teen short form content for YouTube, purchased by DreamWorks for $33 million. And so these acquisitions by the large studios is a super smart move in that even though a lot of these players they're not exactly making a ton of money yet, they are the future of, as we see video innovation happening, short form content, the way future generations or current younger generations are constantly on your mobile phone, constantly on YouTube, and we see the big studios taking notice of that. In terms of Silicon Valley, taking notice of LA, you saw Facebook purchase Oculus Rift for $1 billion, which is probably pretty inexpensive based on Peter's assessment of what's going to happen. So I think that the thing is that entertainment, in my mind, in terms of entertainment and technology come together, it's just the industry's changing. It's not bad news, it's just the news that is. But the cool thing is we have a lot of innovation happening right in LA that we don't necessarily have to rely on other cities like New York or the Valley to reach out and say, oh no, we need a new technology. A lot of that is already being created here. So that's good. The good news.
Well, that is good news.
Yeah.
And so in your opinion, and again, do you think this is a trend? Are we going to see the larger companies continue to invest in startups in Los Angeles to drive innovation and hopefully to help with healthy competition?
I think so. I mean, you see something like a full screen getting attention from AT&T and Chernin. You see something like a Zephyr, which is not exactly a multi-channel network, but a YouTube technology which reads YouTube content and lays ads on top of it. So the original content creator gets a cut of the money, and then the person on YouTube who put up their fun little clip of Goonies or whatever it was, they get to keep their entertainment up there. And so you see these companies playing in that space where they're creating these win-wins, and something LA is good at is making something good for mass audiences but can also be a business. So I think you will see more entertainment studios, or if not the studios, even just big companies like a Google or Facebook, maybe from Silicon Valley, come in and kind of invest in these early innovators who have something really smart and kind of give it that money boost that it needs to get to the next level.
Great. If you were to look down the road 10 to 15 years from now, what might a Warner Brothers look like?
I do think I agree with Peter from earlier that there's this what's going to happen to the brick and mortar. I don't know that you'll see as many things that are kind of the shape that they are now. However, in the time that I was leading mobile technology at the LA Times, I remember there was a point at which mobile technology was really early, and everybody thought, well, in the future there will be no workplaces. You'll just work from a desert island. It doesn't matter. But I think now that we're in this almost Web 3.0, we recognize that being together with people is actually really, there's innovation in that as well, not just alone on your phone. You can do a lot, but it doesn't take the place of people.
Right.
Now, what will happen with Oculus Rift, and I don't know, but I do think in the future we will see a place for these curators of content, because as now everybody thinks they're a content creator, there's tons of music, there's tons of video, things like editors, curators, we'll see that be an uptick, a really strong point, and then you'll also see a drive toward premium content, because there can be a ton of content, but what's really like A-class content will be graded on a tougher scale, I think.
Right,
so.
Good, and I'm going to get back to the curation idea in just a minute. So thank you, fantastic. I want to go on to Cathy. Cathy Pellow, sitting right here, and Cathy's the owner of Sargent House, an LA-based management company and record label that signs new talent, and also Cathy is the owner of the production company Refuse TV, and I love the title of your company. So in her career, Cathy's also been a music video producer for such artists as Sting, the Rolling Stones, Kid Rock, and Paramore. So you've had a very lively career, I could see, and have survived to tell the story. So my first question to you is, Cathy, you've been involved in the music business, sound recording, and music content, part of the entertainment business for a long time, through some very turbulent times, and have experienced dramatic changes in the music business. And I think we're all quite aware of what those are. But as the industry and talent have dispersed geographically, and as a result caused much greater fragmentation, what does that tell us about how the industry works now? And do you believe that the role of the curator, what we were talking about just a little earlier, the role of the curator will become even more essential to help guide us through the vast array of content that is out there now?
I think that 100%, and if I were speaking to a school of young people wanting to get involved in the music business, or even in any kind of entertainment business, I would, it used to be plastics, of one word plastics, now it's I have one word, playlists. It is curation. There's such a massive amount of content on every level. Musically, I come from making films and music videos, which is a perfect example of an industry that pretty much went from being a very profitable production entity to straight up, I used to commission them and produce them, and now budgets, a typical budget, if there is one at all, is 10,000 when they used to be hundreds of thousands. The old curators, AKA the MTVs and Fuse and things that no longer exist in any kind of way, shape, or form supporting music, need to be now replaced. Because even though we can say, MTV doesn't, they don't play videos because people weren't watching them. Well, now people go to YouTube and it's become the #1 search engine for music. So to me, the exciting part is let's come up with the ways to harness how to now expose expose music to new, let's make it easier for people to actually find what they might like. You're finding a lot of that with even just, there's a huge Spotify conversation going on of, which a lot of it is actually misinformation from pop stars. But that being said, streaming is a huge part of the future of music. And it's something that I actually really appreciate because I don't deal in mainstream pop artists. And Spotify's actually created an enormous financial benefit by free exposure for bands to now travel and tour and earn income all over the world, where before they wouldn't have even, you wouldn't have been able to get into that market. I explain a lot to people who talk about streaming, and I say, think about it, we used to pay millions of dollars to get our songs on the radio, and now we have this radio that will play it for free and give us money. Even though you can call it pennies, I see it actually isn't when you deal in volume. So why aren't we celebrating it and saying, all right, let's help make this get interesting? And that comes with curators to me. That comes with the tastemakers who we start to trust. And I'm watching it. I'm watching all my friends who are music supervisors at companies. They're getting hired by Apple right now. And they're going there because they just hired Zane Lowe, who is BBC. The future is we need to have the minds and the tastes that people trust so that we can start building channels off of streaming, which will then, of course, lead into advertising being integrated, et cetera, et cetera. But I feel like that's definitely where a lot of the digital music industry will head, and what's super important there. Do
you think in LA there's a role for Los Angeles to play as a hub for curation?
For sure.
Or can this really just happen anywhere now?
It can happen anywhere, but like everyone has kind of come to agree, we all, computers are fantastic, but at the root of it is humankind and the human ear and the human intuition. And I know that the stimuli of other people and the conversations that are like, oh, did you hear that new music? It starts. Creative people want to be in places where creative things are happening, and so cities always will attract people who are more interesting. To put it bluntly, no one wants to live in Kansas if you actually like cool music or want to make movies. You do end up wanting to live here, and it is a youth-driven business in the beginning. You start off, you're passionate, and you are the seed that starts to grow the plant. Nobody wants to go hang out in like middle of nowhere on their computer by themselves. And curate. And the second someone does, and they're in, wherever they are, and they're making these great Spotify playlists, which is making A&R people go, ah. All of a sudden they're, oh, you're working for Apple now. Who would have known? So you get found and you get brought here. Talent.
So you think the mystique of LA is still allure? It's still, because new careers, new jobs, new aspects of the industry are cropping up. Technology is driving it in that way, and so
I definitely think
LA has a role for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that again, it's a life choice, and at the end of the day, it's where you choose to work. I grew up in New York City. I thought I'd never leave ever because I was from the East Coast.
Culver City.
And now I can't believe why did it take so long? I'm so happy not to be freezing. But a lot of that also had to do with the creative drought that was actually happening in New York, because it did become so expensive that interesting people don't live there anymore. Rich people live there, but not interesting. So it made
So that's a choice for all of you to make. If you want to be interesting, don't worry about making any money.
I want to be rich and interesting.
Okay. That's the new model.
But it was a really sad thing to watch, So.
All right. Thank you. Great. And by the way, for all the panelists, dive into the conversation at any point. We don't have to be so formal with me asking. But I do want to at least get a question to Brian. But please dive in at any time. So our fourth panelist is Brian Farrell, and Brian is the former chairman and CEO of THQ, which before it dissolved in 2013 was a large-scale interactive game entertainment software publisher. And while at THQ, Brian grew the company's global marketing and sales force to directly serve more than 75 countries with offices throughout North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific. It was a massive undertaking, clearly. THQ did business with some of the industry's best-known franchises. Pardon me? There you go, right there. Okay, including WWE and UFC, Disney, Pixar, Nickelodeon, and a lot of others. So, Brian, thanks.
And DreamWorks Animation.
And DreamWorks Animation. So these guys know each other very well, and I expect you to be talking during the panel.
They never called us.
So Brian, I have a question for you. And that is, you've been involved in one of the newest and most rapidly changing parts of the industry, in which both the platforms and business models have been in constant flux. I think we would agree about that, and the audience would agree. So the lines as well between video games and other media have really been blurred. So on the business side, what do you see as the impact of these rapid changes on employment, revenue, and the continued viability of our local entertainment industry?
Well, it's interesting you use the word one of the newer segments of media, because I heard a great quote the other day that gaming is now in its adolescence.
Okay.
Lots of hormones, very confused and still not knowing what it wants to be when it grows up.
Yes, and talking back and complaining. Okay, all right. Okay.
Probably that too.
All right.
And so it's a very interesting time in the game business. And so let's talk about that in the context of a couple of trends that I see. The first one is sort of a dichotomy. It's the dichotomy of both simultaneous concentration and fragmentation of the industry. On the concentration side, like the film entertainment, I like Ken's comments about the below 20 and above 80. The above 80 right now segment, when I got in the games business, we were making games for between $200,000 and $500,000. And budgets now on some of the big titles are over $150 million. So we're truly in Hollywood land right now in some of those. And what happens is the big titles, all your friends are playing them, so the concentration keeps happening. So there's not as many of the large titles with the big production values. There's very few highly concentrated. That also means high concentration in the big studios, big employment. So that's one trend. At the same time, we have fragmentation, right? We've got one of our big specialties was the handheld gaming business, all the way back to Game Boy and all the iterations of handheld hardware after that. And now, as you know, that's been totally disrupted by the handheld mobile devices, both Android and iPod, iTunes, everything else. And the issue there is there are so many games without any curation, really. Discovery is hard, and as a business model, it's very difficult. Things like Angry Birds are a hit, or Candy Crush. But none of those companies have found a sustainable model, not a business model, but a sustainable model to say, how do we keep our customers coming back? And it's a very, very, very difficult business, and as it grows up, it'll be interesting to see how that model evolves. The second thing is segmentation and specialization. In the games business for years, we would take an intellectual property, and the way to make money on it was to spread it across all the platforms that were available at the time. And that was a great way to make money because you had your players playing on either your PlayStation 2 or your handheld or on your other mobile device or even at your PC. The trend now is to have a winner in a segment. Call it Call of Duty on the console side, League of Legends on the free-to-play side. We just mentioned Candy Crush. There's very few that tend to win, so the business has become highly segmented and in a way sort of inefficient. And what that's caused is the corollary to that, which is specialization. The companies are specializing, their teams are specializing, and so you've got this concentration of talent really going into various directions in a very specialized way. So your question now, what does it mean for LA? It's funny, when you're the last person on the last panel of the day, it's all been said, but
it's the best position to have.
I just repeat everything.
You have the prime position, so you're good.
It's about talent. So where is the talent? And so the fact that LA has a great talent base, because especially at the high end, the concentrated, the big games, that is about storytelling now. Gameplay, but production values and storytelling have become extremely important. And that right now, the capital of that is in LA. So I think opportunities, and we even shared talent pool with your company, Lincoln, in terms of a graphic artist or a great programmer. We were competing for talent here in LA, and the talent breeds talent. So I think that's the advantage we have here in LA.
I think we're supposed to open it up to fantastic, all of you are wonderful. We could go for another hour with this. We're just getting started, but we're supposed to open it up to Q&A to the audience. And thank you, panelists. You have been quite wonderful. We could do an entire day on just what you were talking about, Lincoln, or what any of you, a day on curation or anything that you guys were talking about. So maybe we'll come back again and do that. But in the meantime, let's hear from the audience and see what you all have to think about.
I've never targeted kids because I would blow my brains out listening to that music, but that's different. If I were making animation, I would obviously definitely be targeting children, as well as a certain kind of music. But there's no question there's definitely been a slant, because of technology. toward a younger market, simply because older people aren't using it. I think that's all going to change, obviously, as it is being introduced and as it is younger, and we'll never have a generation again that isn't born into computers. So I think once there is more engagement from the older generation, it will become more even. One thing I think that is also really incredible that we didn't talk about at all, but I've seen in my own industry, again with streaming is the number of the access now to media that didn't exist before, simply, by having affordable, phones. Used to be in Europe, they don't have computers at their house. When you live in America, you live in this bubble thinking like, oh, every kid has their own laptop and computer and pad and iPhone, and that's just not true. You go to Belfast and they don't have a computer at their house. They don't have a high-speed internet, but now they do actually have, and they used to have flip phones, the kids. Now they actually have an iPhone equivalent. So now all of a sudden, that is why Spotify is so much bigger. The streaming companies are so much bigger in Europe, and again, are stimulating this different kind of growth and awareness, because now they actually have millions of new users that are using the streaming service. They're not going buying $9.99 on iTunes. Why? I can hear that record. I can hear all these records for $9.99 a month. So there, the subscription service is way more in the mindset that they're much more accepting of it. They see it as a great value. Are you kidding? For the price of one record, I can have any record I want on my phone for $9.99? Here, it's still, I'm not gonna, pay for Spotify. So they're actually consuming way less music. Over there, they know about way more bands. The ticket sales are way better because they have access to the whole library.
Right.
So again, we go back to curation stuff. But that's another thing that is also part of the gaming, everything. It's factoring in the new uses or the access to technology that didn't exist, and just those walls continue to get broken down as price points for things like phones. Used to be only iPhones could do things. Remember? And that was only recently. Now it's like, you go to Walmart and you can buy a phone that you can have Instagram, you can have all the little things.
But now
and they're
Apple's
affordable.
telling me I have to buy a watch now, so what's going to happen?
And they're affordable, and
All
that's open. That's made people be on a computer that didn't have access before.
Great.
So.
One more question, then we're going to have to wrap it up.
I think, when I was writing for Forbes, that question came up a lot about how LA can remain interesting, and I think a lot of it has to do with city support through tax breaks, through even our own infrastructure. A complaint of the tech industry here is that it takes 2 hours to get from Pasadena to Santa Monica. It takes 2 hours to get from UCLA to Long Beach, and you have these disparate communities. They're all very smart, but Caltech is far from UCLA, which is far from Santa Monica. So there's this connective tissue that needs to happen. It could happen with a rail system. We'll see what happens with that. But there's certain infrastructures that I think could help connect people a little bit more. I also believe, because we shouldn't hold our breath for that rail system, I think that there's something to be said about these smaller micro cities, that it's okay to have this special community in Santa Monica, and what can that city do to support these folks in terms of easy ways to get around, free parking. There's lots of things that make it easier for people to communicate, and as I hear in the tech community all the time, it's important to bump into one another and riff on your napkin about this interesting idea. I think storytelling happens that way, and new tech happens that way in the same way.
If the major companies want to stay relevant and they want to look for ways to adapt, then there should be an interesting public-private partnership that happens, where money is invested back into the city to create these kinds of pods and hubs where that kind of creativity and conversation can take place. That's why film and theater schools are so important, because they are natural places for new young talent to to be working together and meet one another, and you know, it's actually a good microcosm of what you're talking about. Yeah, dive in, and then we're gonna have to wrap it up.
Look at what Google's building right now, just for their people to work. It's like parks, and it's like, I want to go work at Google just simply to like go to work there. I think that's
Diversity is
definitely
important as well. though.
yeah. But you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
I live in Echo Park, and it's definitely become like that. You know, where, and I think that is definitely that would. I think it's wise to actually have certain types of companies that do the same thing cluster together, because that's really how, you know, I live where everyone is in a band. You know, everyone is talking about music around me. If I lived in Santa Monica, no one would be talking about the same stuff we talk about at the coffee shop down my street. And it is easier to sort of walk around. It is more. But yeah, tax incentives. We have the highest rents right now.
With that, I want to thank you. You guys have been a great audience. So let's thank our audience, and thank you for allowing us to have this panel with you today. Thank you. And thanks to our panelists. Great job, everybody.